You've probably tried the 5 a.m. wake-up club, the cold showers, the productivity app that guilt trips you every morning. And somewhere around week 2, it quietly died, and you told yourself the same thing you always tell yourself, that you just don't have the discipline other people seem to have. Here's something strange, though. Somewhere across the world, in one of the most academically pressured, work-obsessed countries on Earth, people are pulling off a version of discipline that looks nothing like yours. No alarms at dawn. No war against their own body. Just small, quiet, almost boring routines, repeated so consistently they barely register as effort at all. And the strange part is, none of it costs money. None of it requires an app, a coach, or a 90-day challenge. So maybe the problem was never that you lack willpower. Maybe the problem is that you've been handed the wrong shape of habit entirely. Think about how many times you've started over. New year, new month, new Monday. Each time with genuine intention. Each time collapsing under the exact same weight, not because you didn't care, but because the habit itself was built like a sprint, and your life is a marathon that never actually ends. Nobody warns you about that part. Nobody tells you that the habit you're chasing was engineered for a highlight reel, not for a Tuesday in February when nothing is going right, and you still have to show up for yourself anyway. Because here's an uncomfortable truth. Most of the discipline content you consume wasn't built for you. It was built to perform well on a screen. Extreme habits get clicks. Ice baths get views. A calm, repeated ritual at 7 p.m. every night doesn't trend, but it might actually survive contact with your real, tired, distracted life. You didn't fail the habit. The habit was never designed to survive an ordinary Tuesday. But this is where things get strange. Because if willpower isn't the missing ingredient, something else has to be doing the work. And it isn't motivation either. Motivation is unreliable, moody, gone by Thursday. So, what's actually holding these habits together? Here's the part most people never think about. A lot of what looks like self-discipline in daily Korean life isn't really internal at all. It's environmental. It's social. A habit that's expected by everyone around you doesn't need your motivation. The environment enforces it for you. You don't have to want to eat dinner at a certain time if everyone in your life already treats that time as sacred. You don't have to talk yourself into a habit that the world around you has already normalized. The discipline was never inside the person. It was built into the air they were breathing. That single idea quietly explains why so many of your own habits collapse. You're trying to hold up a structure completely alone, using willpower as the only support beam. No wonder it buckles. And there's a deeper realization hiding just underneath that one. When a habit depends entirely on your internal state, your mood, your energy, your motivation that particular morning, it's fragile by design. It only survives on your best days. But a habit that's held up by something outside you, something that doesn't care how you're feeling, keeps going even on the days you'd otherwise give up. That's not a personality difference. That's an architecture difference. And architecture, unlike willpower, doesn't run out by 3 p.m. So let's look at what this actually looks like in practice, not as a checklist, but as a pattern. Take something as small as a shared meal. In many Korean households, mealtimes aren't just about food. They're a fixed anchor point in the day, almost sacred in their consistency. No negotiation, no scrolling through 5 delivery apps at 11 p.m. deciding what your life should look like tonight. The decision is already made. And that removes an entire category of decision fatigue you didn't even realize was draining you. Or take the quiet ritual of tea or a short evening walk after dinner, not for fitness, not tracked on a watch, not optimized. Just a small transition between work mode and rest mode, repeated so often it becomes invisible. Here's why that matters more than it seems. Your brain doesn't burn out from effort. It burns out from never getting a clear signal that the day is actually over. These tiny rituals are doing something your to-do list never does. They're closing a loop. At first, This seems like a small lifestyle detail, until you notice what it's actually doing underneath. It's not building willpower. It's removing the need for it. There's another version of this you've probably seen without naming it, the quiet discipline around care. Skincare routines that aren't about vanity at all, but about a few minutes of undivided attention to yourself at the same point every night, regardless of how the day went. It sounds almost too small to matter. But here's the part that's easy to miss. The habits that survive aren't the ones that demand the most from you. They're the ones so modest, so low stakes, that skipping them would feel stranger than doing them. And then there's the layer most self-improvement content completely ignores, the social one. Respect-based routines. Shared responsibility. Habits that are witnessed, not hidden. In an individualist culture, a habit is something you carry alone, in private and quietly abandon in private too, with nobody ever knowing. But when a habit is embedded in relationships, family, coworkers, community, there's a quiet accountability that doesn't feel like pressure because it isn't punishment-based. It's just presence. Someone is there. Someone notices. Maybe the real reason your habits keep failing isn't that you're weak. It's that you're trying to hold them up completely alone, in a culture that treats self-sufficiency as a virtue, even when it's quietly exhausting you. But here's where we have to be honest, because this isn't a fairy tale about a perfect culture that solved discipline. Korea is not without its own pressure, often intense, often unforgiving, academically and professionally. These habits weren't invented as some peaceful alternative to hustle culture. In many ways, they're survival tools, built inside a system that demands a lot from people. The problem isn't that Western self-improvement is fake and this is real. The problem is more specific than that. This works, but only if you understand what's actually transferable. You can't import a culture's social fabric by yourself. You can't manufacture the sense of communal witnessing that makes some of these habits feel light instead of heavy. If you try to copy the aesthetic, the tea, the walk, the tidy little ritual, without any of the surrounding structure, you risk turning something meant to feel supportive into just another obligation you're carrying alone. Most people misunderstand this because they see the behavior and copy the behavior without ever noticing the invisible support system underneath it. This is where a lot of self-improvement content quietly lies to you. It shows you the surface of a habit and implies that copying the surface will produce the same result, as if discipline were a costume you could put on. But a walk after dinner means something different when it's shared with someone than when it's a solitary task added to an already long list of things you're doing alone, for yourself, by yourself, again. The habit isn't the whole story. The context around it is doing at least half the work, and that's the part nobody puts in a thumbnail. So, what actually translates? Not the culture, not the pressure. The underlying principle, that consistency doesn't require intensity, and that small, repeated, low-friction actions are more sustainable than anything built on peak motivation. You don't need a village to start eating dinner at the same time every night. You don't need a whole society to give yourself one small, non-negotiable transition ritual between your workday and your evening. You just need to stop designing habits that require you to be a slightly better, more disciplined version of yourself every single day, and start designing ones that ask almost nothing of the version of you that's already exhausted. Maybe that's the real shift here. Not becoming someone new. Not finding some deeper reserve of willpower you've been missing. Just noticing that discipline doesn't have to feel like a fight against yourself. Somewhere it became normal to believe that transformation has to hurt to count. That if a habit feels easy, it isn't really working. But the quietest, smallest rituals, the ones almost too boring to mention, might be doing more for you than anything that ever asked you to suffer first. You were never missing the willpower. You were never lazy, undisciplined, or somehow behind everyone else. You were just missing a structure gentle enough to actually hold you, even on the days you had nothing left to give it. If this made you think about your own habits a little differently, you can subscribe. There's more like this coming.